This is the TSG Multimedia podcast for August of 2020. We're sponsored this month by Soundtraxx, Rails by the Bay 2021, and the TSG Train Crew on Patreon. Thank you very much. I'm your host, John Abaticola, coming to you from the TSG Multimedia Intergalactic Headquarters. And this month, I have all the news and updates from July, and I want to mention the new sponsor I just announced. Rails by the Bay 2021 is the name of the NMRA National Convention and Train Show being held in Santa Clara, California in July of next year. I'm excited about being part of the process, and thank you for your support. July was jam-packed with video conferences, a TSG Train Crew virtual hangout, and a lot more. Our sponsor Soundtraxx also made a big announcement about a new 21-pin decoder. Let's talk to George about that now in this month's Soundtraxx Soundbyte. Okay, so I have George dialed up. Good to see you again, George. What do you have for us this month?
Well, this month we actually have a pretty exciting announcement we just made a couple of weeks ago. At the same day we attended the virtual train show. But we have a new 21-pin NEM 8 function version that's now in stores and shipping now. This includes 2 additional fully controlled functions, just like our popular PNP 8 that we released a few months ago. This gives us another option with the 8-function decoder. Now, I have in front of me here an Intermountain Tier 4 GEVO, and in this GEVO, I have actually installed a 21-pin NEM 8. And for the motherboard, I actually used one of Nick's Train's Decoder Buddies, which is a motherboard that's already pre-wired and pre-regulated for LEDs. So all I had to do was connect all the wires for my LEDs to that circuit board directly, and then simply plug in the 21P NEM 8 so that now I can take advantage of all of the lighting functions. Now remember, as we've talked about, you have full control of all of these lights, and so even function 7 and even function 8, you can actually turn those into different lighting effects. Including things like Mars lights or gyro lights, or as I have here, with a flashing rear end device. So, John, let's take a quick tour of our locomotive here, and I'll show you all the different lights that we've got, and do a quick little run by to just kind of show you what you're getting.
Yeah, let's do that. Sounds cool.
Okay, so John here on my Intermountain Tier 4, I've got the headlight on but dimmed. So that's a separate independent function. 0 turns on the headlight. Function 28 actually turns on my reverse light. So we undim the headlight. Now we use function 24, which is the FX3 for my ditch lights. We use FX4, which is button 25 for the number boards. We use FX5, which is button 26 for the truck lights. And then we use FX6, which is button 27 for the step and walkway lights. And you can kind of see how those lights are on the step wells, and you can also see the light on the side of the long hood there above the step. And this goes all the way around, so there's actually 8 LEDs wired up to that lighting output. Now on FX7, I have wired up the red emergency that's in the modern GE locomotive. So when the locomotive actually goes into emergency, you'll actually see the red light come on. And so you can kind of see how that goes on when I throw the emergency. And that's a very unique Soundtraxx feature, that you can trigger an emergency light in conjunction with the e-stop button. So we throw a motor control out and you see that go away. And then the FX8 is actually wired to a blue flag, and I've got it set up for a Fred light, and that's actually mounted in the cabs. Now the FX8 is by default turned on with button 28, but since I have that controlling my rear light, I've actually got this tied in with F15. And the reason for that is so that way when I tie on the handbrake, it will trigger the blue flag. So now when I hit the F15, you'll actually hear the handbrake tie down, and you'll actually see the blue flag come on. Now this is a really cool lighting effect, and this takes advantage of all of the different lights that you can see. So now let's take this locomotive, we'll couple it up with the installation we did a few months ago with the TSU PNP 8, and show you just how all these lights really help bring those locomotives to life.
that looks really cool. And I think that a lot of people are going to want to do something similar. Now, what did it take to get all that done? I mean, it seems like a lot of work.
Well, installing the decoder, running the wires is actually the most amount of work that you're going to do, because all of the sounds and everything is, and all the software is already preloaded into the decoder. When we build in Durango, Colorado, we pre-test everything by hand to make sure that the decoder is functioning in the proper way before it gets in your hands.
Right.
So with that, I will allude to an upcoming YouTube video on our YouTube channel at Soundtraxx Videos, that I actually go through a step-by-step process on what it takes to set up all of those lights like I did. And also I go a little bit further in depth and we talk about setting up the braking and the momentum. We set up the dynamic digital exhaust. We set up volume controls and even add a little bit of reverb to the air horn. I'm sure you heard that in that demonstration there.
Yeah, cool. So you showed all of this on your video?
Yes, now what I did with this video was it was actually a full-scale explanation of the feature, how I set up my locomotives, and then a demonstration of that. So it ended up being a little bit of a long video. It's going to end up being right around about 60 minutes or 62 minutes, I think it was. But it will be posting not this week, but it'll be coming up next week. We're working through the editing and putting the subtitles and putting the CV values and the CV numbers in the video there. So we'll have some good content. Watch as much of it as you like, as little of it as you like. And if you want to be notified when that video posts, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Search Soundtraxx Videos or go to our website and click the link for the YouTube icon, because we've got some cool videos coming up. I also have another one where I do a full upgrade to the Tsunami 2 on a Broadway limited steam locomotive and walk you through that process step by step, and that one's about 48 minutes. So it's very detailed. I want to make sure that when I put this information in these videos that you guys can actually go out and work on your own locomotives and do all the stuff that we've built into it, and decide, if you may not like as much momentum as I do, but you at least see what you're doing, and so that way you can adjust the CV values for yourself. So I'm very big advocate for more information is always better.
Yeah, for sure. No, that's really great. And I think that it's really cool that you're not just selling stuff, but you're showing people and explaining things. That's a really good bonus, I think, for people that want to subscribe to the channel. So I think of
absolutely.
I think I try to do the same thing with my channel, trying to show people as much as possible so that they're exposed to more than just one thing, So I think that's really great.
You'll be happy to know that I actually took, we have a new gal working in the office now. Her name's Sierra, and she'll be primarily helping out and answering phones and sales and so forth. But I did show her your model railroading 101 videos to try to help get her familiar with model railroading, the hobby, and everything. So I definitely agree. Information is great.
Cool. Well, I appreciate that too. Maybe we'll have one more subscriber from someone at Soundtraxx. No,
there you go.
I would be remiss if I didn't ask you about something else that's been on my mind, because as we're speaking, the end of July is coming up pretty fast, and our TSG 15 discount code ends at the end of July. But I was hoping to find out if you know what I'm going to say.
No, but I should make you ask.
You don't do that. It's already humbling. No, let's do it, right?
Yeah.
Through August? Through August we do it?
Yeah, let's go ahead and do it. We go ahead and authorize the TSG 15 extended through the month of August. So, guys, if you do have anything that you have Soundtraxx products, obviously we encourage you to check with your local retailer. But if you can't find one nearby, be sure to check out our website at soundtraxx.com. You'll use the code TSG15, all one word, at the checkout counter, and when you get that, it'll apply your 15% discount, and that'll go for all the Soundtraxx products that we have online. Right. And also, while you're there, don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter. We've got some cool announcements that we haven't been able to announce yet because we weren't quite ready. So we've got some really cool stuff. John, I know you'll be interested in this, so make sure you're subscribed, and we'll get the announcements out as soon as we're ready.
Hey, and maybe we'll even talk about whatever it is next month, right?
Let's hope so.
Yeah, cool. Well, hey, thanks a lot, George. We'll see you next time.
Sounds good. Thanks, John.
I think the fact that George is going through all the trouble to make the install videos available to the public is a great thing. I know what it takes to make a video like that, so good job, George. Also, don't forget to apply the coupon code TSG15 for your discount on Soundtraxx's website. Ordering from Soundtraxx with the code lets them know that you heard about it here. You win because you get a good discount on great decoders made right here in the US. They win because you buy something, and I win because they continue supporting my work. All that sounds like a win-win-win for all of us. On July 18th, the TSG train crew from Patreon was invited to a private video conference with Joshua E. Dyer, the author of Barons, a historical fiction book about the Central Pacific during the development of the Transcontinental Railroad. You can find this book on Amazon and other book-selling places by searching for Barons and Joshua's pen name, J.E. Dyer. I'm guessing most of you know this, but in case you don't, historical fiction is fiction set in the context of historically accurate settings. I like to think of it like a Proto-Lance model railroad layout, where people take fictional elements and apply them to non-fiction settings, or the other way around, to create something that's plausible, even though it might not be 100% accurate. We had a great conversation, and train crew members were able to ask questions about Joshua's approach to research, writing, and other things as well. I refer to Patreon supporters as the TSG train crew. I recently started giving all train crew members access to an exclusive video channel where they can watch content without having to watch YouTube's ads. I figured that was the least I could do since their support makes what I do possible. And so far, everyone seems to like it quite well. On July 19th, we went live from the studio here with our 5th episode of TSG Live Shelter in Place. In this episode, I shared some recent news about Caltrain and had a great session with the best viewers on YouTube. Something I've been doing with TSG Live Shelter in Place videos, because they're so long and because sometimes we cover a lot of topics, is to add what YouTube calls chapters to the video. If you look down in the video's written description, you can find a list of the subjects that were covered and at what time in the video that they were covered. You can click on those to go straight to the topic listed. It takes a while to get it all set up, but it's pretty cool, and it gives you an easy way to navigate straight to the part you want to watch. On Monday the 20th, I spoke with Chris Palermo. Chris is the president of the NMRA Pacific Coast region, and also the publicist for the 2021 NMRA National Convention, Rails by the Bay 2021. During our conversation, Chris presented a very thorough PowerPoint presentation about the convention. You can see this entire presentation right here on the channel at 5 p.m. today. In the video, he covers just about everything you might possibly want to know about what's being planned for the National Convention taking place in the Bay Area next year. Everything from clinics and layout tours to operating sessions, prototype tours, and other attractions in the area. So over the next 11 months, we'll be covering more important announcements about the convention here on the channel as they develop. Don't miss the video at 5. On Tuesday the 21st, I was joined by my friend Jamie West for the first ever live Q&A on Instagram. I realize Instagram is an important social media channel, and we have hundreds of people subscribed to us there. Add to this the fact that Jamie has kind of been after me to do this for a few months, and the result is that we finally did it. You can find this program on Instagram TV, or IGTV, as I found out it's called by Instagrammers. On the 22nd, I sat down and talked with Alan Sigworth, Jeff Schwab, and Charles Franz from the Niles Canyon Railway Steam Department. The conversation is about their acquisition of Southern Pacific 1744, a 260 locomotive that has a history in our area. Let's go to that now. Okay, so I have Alan Sigworth, Jeff Schwab, and Charles Franz on the line here on a Zoom call. Thank you very much for joining us here, guys. We appreciate your time to take a minute and talk about this. So I guess we can start with you, Jeff. Can you talk a little bit about the search for 1744 and how it came to be that you guys found the perfect locomotive?
Sure. The Pacific Locomotive Association Board of Directors asked the steam department to start looking for a locomotive that would fit our line, which is a Southern Pacific line. And obviously a tender, as everybody knows that in the past we've been running tank engines, logging engines. There's nothing wrong with that, but they wanted something that would fit more to our Southern Pacific history. We had searched and looked at other locomotives around the West Coast, and we found out that the 1744 was becoming available. And we were liking the engine just because it's not too big and it's not too small. It should be able to pull our trains that we have on a regular basis with no problem. It definitely has a big enough tender with water. We won't have to worry about that on a regular operating day.
So in your search, because I would imagine that it must be kind of hard to find a used steam locomotive. I mean, I guess that's all you could find, but what other engines, what types of engines were you seeing out there? Like, because the 1744 is a mogul, right? It's a 260, isn't it?
Yes. 50% of the time, we're always running backwards.
Right.
So we wanted to find a locomotive that we'd be comfortable running backwards and forwards. The engines we have today running, like our Clover Valley Malley and our Robert Dollar number 3 and the Quincy number 2, they're a lot easier to running backwards and forwards. They were built that way, designed that way. So finding a larger locomotive, you want something that is comfortable running both directions. We did look at 282s. We were talking to somebody about one, but it was a login engine, but that didn't pan out. We were looking at other moguls, and that didn't pan out either. So yes, it is hard to find engines, especially museums that are willing to let them go, or organizations or cities or whatever willing to let them go. It's like you said, they're not everywhere. We're not in the 1950s anymore where there was engines and scrap lines or still in roundhouses sitting around. So yeah, it took a while to do research, make phone calls, not have people laugh at you and say, "Are you serious?" Yes, we're serious. We want to try on another project. Also add that the engines that we still have in our fleet, Shays and Heisler, it just doesn't really fit right now for what we have going forward. The Shay is nice, but it's slow. It wouldn't make it on the regular operations. The Heisler, it's a login engine, Club wants something that has a tender and looks more to the Southern Pacific style. So that's why we ventured out looking for another engine.
Right. So you found really what sounds like almost the perfect fit, or if not the perfect fit. I'm kind of curious then, and maybe you could speak to this, Charles, if you would like, about, what are the logistics of getting a piece of equipment like that across from wherever it came from? I think it came from Texas, didn't it, someplace? Or Colorado, I'm sorry.
If you talk about the history of the locomotive, it sort of came from all over. Also, to elaborate on something that Jeff was saying, a big key sort of thing that I was always sort of after was the right size driver locomotive.
True.
Exactly. We've always run 44-inch drivers, which on most of our steam engines, which makes for a better tractive effort, starting longer trains, and not necessarily running at high speed, which we don't really do in the canyon. We go all of maybe 20 miles an hour at the most. And so with the 1744's drivers, it was sort of not too big, not too small. And I think that was a big factor in our decision as well. And of course, the history of the locomotive, West Coast. So yeah, speaking to where it came from, the engine ran on the SP. It was built in 1901. Ran on the Western Division, the San Joaquin Division, Los Angeles Division. So it was a Southern Pacific engine for its whole life before, and sort of tapped by the SP in the later years to run a lot of excursions, which actually one of our founding members got a chance to ride. And we have some slides from his collection from the 1744's last excursion on the Knights Landing branch outside of Sacramento. But the logistics, after the SP retired it went to Utah for a while on display. It went to the Heber Creeper, where they restored it to run. In fact, a few people have reached out to us that actually worked on the 1744 out of Utah, which was interesting. After that, it went to New Orleans. It was restored to run on the Gulf Coast, New Orleans and Gulf Coast Railroad, which had something to do with Texas. To be honest, I forget actually how.
Yeah, actually, Charles, it was in Texas, there in Grapevine, Fort Worth.
That's right.
And I actually looked at it back, I want to say it was around 2000. PLA was looking, and they knew it was for sale. And I went and looked at it and kind of decided that there was no way we would be able to afford to fix the thing. The firebox was shot, and it needed a lot of work. And we didn't have a lot of money back then, so it was like just the moving cost alone would have been a huge issue for our fledgling railroad. Yeah. So it kind of let it go, and then it ended up going to New Orleans from there.
I'd like to ask you a question, if I could, guys. You were mentioning early, Charles, about the 44-inch drivers on everything else, and I know that I read the specs on the 1744, but I don't remember what size are the drivers. Are they 44 or no?
They're 63.
Oh, okay. So it's really meant to go faster, isn't it?
It is, yeah. The SP liked those moguls. In fact, that's one of the reasons the old, turn of the century moguls sort of hung on for so long, as they're fairly light. They could run on a lot of the more dilapidated branch lines of the SP, but still be able to keep up with mainline speeds. They were light on their feet. They could traverse the small branch lines, but if they needed to get out on the main, they could do it. So that was, that to us is sort of a perfect melding, if you will, where not too tall, not too short, light on its feet, but still heavy enough to pull the longer trains that we've been wanting to pull.
Do you guys have any concerns about that, though? Because I know that the freight engines or the switching engines, like the tank engines that you've been using with the smaller drivers, are you anticipating any? Because I know there's a grade through the canyon. I mean, it's not a flat run.
No, it'll be fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's certainly much heavier than our existing locomotives. Okay. So it's going to give us extra weight, more weight on the drivers. They're taller, so it's just going to give us more tractive effort and more speed if we need it.
Right.
But as far as moving it, it was fairly complicated. So all things put together, the locomotive ended up in Alamosa, Colorado, for the San Luis and Rio Grande Railroad, where they ran it for one season before it went down for some significant boiler work. And the parts sort of got scattered from there. The boiler went down south. Everything sort of scattered for several years while they were working on the restoration, before everything finally came back to San Luis, but unfinished. So 99% of the parts ended up back in Alamosa. And when Iowa Pacific, or at least the San Luis Rio Grande, went into receivership, we as an organization discussed it and figured, we needed to at least go out and kick the tires on everything and see if there was anything we were interested in. We went out sort of with an open mind. We went to look at the 1744, the LS&I 18 and the LS&I 20, which previously came from the Grand Canyon Railroad, and ended up there in Alamosa. We looked at those 3 steam engines and a few other cars and this and that. And while the 1744 certainly, needs a lot of work, it was the best choice for us. And then at that point, it was a matter of sort of circling the wagons and wading through a fair amount of, I don't want to say litigation, but certainly complication with the sale, and the receivership and the eventual bankruptcy of Iowa Pacific. But once all that got worked out, we brought a team of wonderful PLA volunteers that gave up an entire week of their jobs and families, and we all went out to Alamosa. And there were a lot of sort of wrenches that got thrown in the works. I won't go into great detail, but best laid plans. Ended up having to do a lot of pivoting and a lot of sort of quick work on our feet. And our success in that certainly was due to the very dedicated efforts of the other 2 folks on this call, and the folks that came out to Alamosa with us and put in long back-breaking days of lifting a steam locomotive part by part, really. And so we're actually not finished with the move yet. We're hoping to tie up the last loose strings in the next month or so. But,
so I have a question. So when you're talking about people going out and having to find the parts and all that, was it just in a yard and everything was scattered all over the place? So you really needed people to know what they were talking about or what they were looking for? Or did they have it mostly collected? I see Jeff laughing, so this might be a good question.
Certainly not. No. There were, I like to call it fields of debris. But I will, so actually I should say the folks at San Luis Rio Grande were also a huge help to us. I left that out. Of course, our volunteers, but they had certainly done their best in light of everything that was going on to keep everything contained, to keep the theft out. They really, that locomotive would not be in the shape that it's in right now if it weren't for the employees at San Luis Rio Grande. So while everything was kind of in several debris fields, they knew exactly what was where and which parts were where. And Alan and I flew out earlier when we made the initial inspection, and we basically cataloged everything where it was. But they also had a lot of steam locomotive parts that went to the LS&I engines. So there was a lot of, well, is that ours or is that theirs? And we had to do a lot of sort of thinking and math and is that a one throttle? Is that an SP? It was a lot, and we ended up, being very diligent and, marking what we decided was ours, and that went into the contract, and it was very specific. It's not the first time the PLA has purchased a pile of parts as a locomotive. So,
No.
we did the same thing with the Robert Dollar 3. It was a pile of parts, and same with the 1744. So we basically just were very diligent about making sure everything was wrangled and marked, and that we took it with us.
It kind of comes to an interesting point, I think, that there are people around, that would be you guys, who know enough to recognize what you actually do need. I think that's kind of cool. And, we're talking 60 or 70 years after steam was gone from, really what do you call it? Large use, I guess you could call it.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a level of knowledge, I think, that comes into play. That's, to me, it's just impressive that you guys know enough to know what you're looking at and pick up the right stuff. That's pretty cool.
We'll find out if we have
right when you're putting it all together. But now so most of it's here. I mean, the rest of it's going to be here at some point, probably in the near future. So, and I guess, Alan, if you want, you could talk to this. What happens? I mean, all the parts are finally there. You must have a process, right? You make a list, and you have to go through it like building a model. You have to make a specific list so that you're not having to go back and do something. Oh, that won't fit now because we already put this other stuff on here. Do you know what I mean? Like, is that a part of the process?
That sounds good in theory. There's no guarantee that will happen.
Well, right. My point though is that you have to be methodical, right? I mean, you can't just just put all this stuff together, right?
Yeah. So I mean, we looked, like Jeff said, we looked at many locomotives. One advantage to this engine is it's already taken apart. Now, whether that's advantage, that's debatable. But right at this point, the boiler's been sent out, and a lot of work was done to it. There's a lot more work that still needs to be done, but all the majority of the parts are there. So it's a fairly straightforward reassembly of the firebox and put the tubes in. So that's something we're gonna have a shop or a contractor do that work for us. That way we get the boiler back in one piece. There's a lot of welding because the whole firebox has been cut out of it. So one of the advantages to this locomotive when we talked about getting it is when we get done with this project, this engine will have practically a brand new boiler. I mean, this boiler will be good for the PLA for 50 years at least. Not that you won't have to work on it, but we're starting from a good point. And then like the frame, which is still in Colorado that we're going to move soon, most of the parts have been taken off of it, which is an advantage because we can look at it, inspect things. We don't have everything. A lot of it you got to take off to look at stuff. So it's already taken off. We'll start working on the running gear, looking and inspecting. We don't suspect we're going to find any huge surprises, but we can go through each piece, and then as we put it on, we can check stuff and slowly reassemble the locomotive there in the canyon. So that's kind of the program. At least that's what we're hoping the program is.
Right. So now here's a question, and I'm sure that most of the people watching are probably anxious to know, how long will it take? And I know that there's always a nebulous part to that answer because you really don't know until you're working on the thing. But do you have some kind of a goal for yourselves, like less than 50 years, but you know what I mean?
Yeah, none of us want 50 years because we won't be around to see it run. But.
That's why I said less than 50.
Yeah.
No, I mean the plan when we acquired it, we kind of put together a schedule of what we want to do with it, and we're hopeful we can get this thing running in 5 to 6 years.
Oh, okay,
that's kind of our goal. A lot of that hinges on funding. Like any other project in the restoration world, fixing costs money. So we've one of the reasons we spaced it out over 5 years is we were hoping we could stomach the costs of doing the work a little bit at a time rather than, if we have the boiler work done and it could get done in 6 months, but the organization doesn't have the money to pay to get it done in 6 months. So we stretch it out. We can pay a little bit every year, and then it'll be done, and then it'll come back, and then we'll have a lot of work to reassemble the locomotive, put the boiler on the frame, and all the plumbing and stuff. So that's our plan. I mean, no sooner did we go to Colorado and get all the parts than COVID came along, and the railroad hasn't been running, so we're not bringing any revenue in. And so, like I said, it's going to be driven by money, the schedule, but we're excited to get cracking on the frame and the running gear because we can do a lot of that ourselves. So.
Yeah. Do you have some idea about once they do get here, how soon? I mean, because with COVID, I know that there's been some hesitation by the organization to have people coming down to work on stuff. I know, if I remember right, I thought I had an email or something from somebody that they were like, no, nobody can come because somebody tested positive for COVID, or something like that. Is that going to throw a wrench into the whole getting started once the pieces are here?
Well, maybe. I mean, we're all living it. We just live it a day at a time with what's going on. So we've been doing work a little bit at the yard and trying to do it safely. So when time comes, we'll move forward and try to continue that.
So it's really just a step at a time, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is.
One day at a time.
But I mean, everybody in our group is super excited to get started on it. Kind of frustrated we're at home not working on it, but
yeah,
we'll get there.
But you also got to remember that we still have the Skookum that we are graciously borrowing for this year, and we have 2 other steam locomotives. And I don't know if everybody knows, but our staff is not huge. I mean, on a regular basis, we have maybe 2 guys, maybe 3 guys down there on weekends when we're actually open. Right, Alan? I mean, you're not talking about a lot of volunteers. So we're always looking for more volunteers to try to keep everything going. We still have to produce with our regular steam locomotives on running once we open up again, and rebuild the 1744. There's no back shop separate crew. So the guys you see running the locomotives or getting them ready are also rebuilding engines.
Right.
It's a lot of work, a lot of time and effort. So we're always looking for skilled people. We're always looking for money to help, so that we can contract things out so we can get these projects out faster. But without volunteers and out money, it's going to take time. That's why we schedule it further out.
Right. That was something actually that I wanted to touch on during this talk too, because I know that it's like that. I've been around long enough and been a member of the PLA long enough to understand, and we talked about this when we talked in the yard about for the Steamfest video that we did a few years ago, that people don't realize how much work goes into everything. So what can people do? Say someone's watching and they're like, wow, I want to help. Okay. There's 2 things I think that people can do that are obvious to me. One is to volunteer, like what you're talking about. And the other thing is to donate money. So how do they do that? Don't you guys have a page set up for the 1744 project? And can they go to, Niles Canyon Railway or NCRY I think it's .org to go and volunteer? Or what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, I mean, they can go to the www.nilesncry.org. And there's several places you can donate on there. There's a section for, how can I help? 1744 is high on the list of projects that need money donated. The Steam Department has a separate website that has a lot of pictures and history and of work on our other locomotives in the past as we were rebuilding them. And of course, we've added a section for the 1744, which we'll update as things move along so people can kind of go to the website and see what we're doing, what we're working on. We found that, people are really interested to see what's happening as time progresses. And then certainly the membership applications are also on the website, and we're always looking for new members. The organization has jobs for just about any type of skill, and none of us came to the PLA knowing about steam locomotives.
No.
Right.
We've all kind of learned on the job, and I think the PLA is a historical preservation organization, but I always like to say one of the key things we do beyond restoring and preserving equipment is preserving the knowledge and the skills that are needed to maintain the equipment. Because if you don't have that, the equipment is not going to run long. This stuff isn't complicated, but in a lot of ways, it's a lost art, and there's techniques and things you need to know, and that we try to glean that and learn. Jeff and I have been doing it for way longer than we want to admit. We're always learning something from somebody, or we get into something that we don't know where we are. We call people or talk to other people in the industry, and it's just it's an important thing to kind of keep the knowledge base growing in the heritage railway business.
Well, so assume someone's watching who really doesn't know anything about steam engines. They can still help, right? I mean, because you still have to sand stuff, or isn't there still something for people to do, even if they don't know how to work on steam engines already?
Absolutely. Steam engines are a dirty animal, and there's a lot of work involved with cleaning, painting, that type of thing. Even on the running ones, you got greasing, cleaning. It doesn't take a lot of skill, but it's stuff that's got to get done, and every set of hands helps. So.
Right. I can imagine, I've had this this example with people before, that I used to be a house painter, and we would paint a house, and there's nothing like standing back at the curb at the end of the day or at the end of the job and saying, wow, that looks really good. And I can't imagine that you don't get something similar to that feeling of satisfaction when you get to see these machines running up and down the canyon, or in your guys' case, get to actually run the machines up and down the canyon. I think that must be a really satisfying feeling to get. And so for people to come in and be able to help in whatever way they can, they'll have some piece of that, in 5 or 6 years, whenever the 1744 is running again. And I would think could be a very good motivating factor for a lot of people.
Yeah, I think we all sort of started in the same boat. I may not be quite as seasoned as Alan and Jeff.
You're not saying these guys are old, are you?
No, heavens no. But same. Alan started, laying track, and Jeff started in the pit. I started in the pit. I don't know how many times I cleaned out the pit. But yeah, when you see all the smiling faces on Sunday operations, or if we're doing a photo charter, and you get to stand back and watch, a literal piece of history roll by, that's pretty cool. And it's nice to be able to know that you contributed to that.
Yeah, and even small things, John, I'm thinking back to the 3. We got the 3. It was just a frame with no wheels under it, and it sat.
Frame and boiler.
Yeah, it sat in our shop for years on blocks. And the day we were able to lower it down and set it on the wheels, it was nowhere near running. But that was a major accomplishment. We really, that was a happy event, and very emotional because how long everybody had worked towards it. So we always like to see them run, but there's times in between when, as you're going through the process, they're big events, and you'll work months to get to one of those big events. That's Charlie mentioned track work. I Jeff and I both started building track out there. The nice thing about building track is at the end of the day, you look back, look at that. There's another 500 feet of track that we built. It's immediate gratification. This working on mechanical stuff, sometimes it takes a while to get to the point where you can see what you've done, you know?
Yeah.
It is hard to try to keep people enthusiastic when, you know, you might be cleaning up bolts or a frame part, but, you know, we're always looking for those people that just want to keep things moving along and things maintained. And that's for everywhere out there, from the diesels to the track to the signals to the cars and to our department. And it just takes a lot of time and effort that the usual person that comes out doesn't see. They don't see the person coming out at 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock in the morning to get the engine ready, when they just have a flashlight checking on things and whatnot to get things started.
Right.
So we're always looking for those type of people. It's not always a glorious job of being, you know, blowing the whistle and pulling the throttle, but it takes a team, and a team makes it work. And we understand that. And we try to make sure that everybody knows that they are special in that team.
Something else I would think is worthy of mention is that, you know, you talk about dirty jobs or cleaning bolts or whatever, it's all stuff that has to get done too. So even if someone is just doing this sort of grunt work, they're helping. And I think there can easily be a sense of accomplishment with that too. So.
Absolutely. I mean, we try to make a point with everybody, you know, step back at the end of the day, or maybe not the every day, but the end of the month or wherever you get to a point, and think about what all went into putting something back together. So,
Right.
I wanted to say that it is amazing for our group that we kept this project under wraps for so long until we made the announcement. Everybody knows in this railroad world that everybody wants to be the first one to speak about it. And I'm really proud of our group of keeping a lid on it until we were able to announce what we were doing. I think that's huge, you know, especially nowadays.
Yeah. We talked about that a little bit earlier this week, Alan and I, because I was asking the question, you know, why is it always so secretive? Since you brought it up, Jeff, you want to kind of comment about that? Why is it always so secretive when a group is trying to acquire a locomotive, or maybe a locomotive is going to move to another location? What do you think is the mystery? Why so?
I can say from experience, and Alan can agree, when we went after the Robert Dollar number 3 and certain people found out that we were acquiring the number 3, parts disappeared.
Right.
Really unique parts that we had to take the time and effort and have parts machined and made, and spent a lot of money on it and had to do the engineering. And so with that in the back of our mind, yeah, we have to be quiet. As Charlie said, the parts were spread everywhere. Somebody could take a widget and it's gone. And then we have to make a new one, which costs more money, more time and effort. And so, yes, we have to be quiet about certain things. We don't want things walking away. It just bit us before. So I was really proud of our group holding it together so we could get everything, especially the smaller parts, picked up and moved.
Right.
Yeah, and I mean, truthfully, John, the acquisition process, I mean, that went on for 4 months, I think. And there were a couple times where it looked like the deal was going to fall through. So announcing a deal before the deal is done is probably not a good idea.
Right.
So that's another issue. You know, you can talk about it, but there's legal stuff going on that you don't want any outside influence affecting. So.
Right. All right. Well, I really want to thank you guys for taking the time to talk, Jeff and Charles and Alan. Really appreciate it. I think that the acquisition of this locomotive is a really great story because it's almost like a piece of original equipment coming home in a way, just because it did work out in our area before in its heyday. And I really wanted to share that with the audience here. So I thank you very much for joining us here. And we'll make sure to get the word out as much as possible so that maybe people who want to help can come help, or people who can't help physically but can help with a donation can do that. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, appreciate it.
I think it's worth repeating that these projects don't happen all on their own. It takes a lot of people who are committed and willing to make it happen, whether by helping in person or donating money. So head over to ncry.org and help in whatever way you can. Thanks to Alan, Charles, and Jeff for providing their insight about this project. Speaking of projects that don't finish themselves, I learned about another one being taken on by one of my favorite regional heritage railroads or museums, the Western Railway Museum. They found a PCC streetcar that originally worked in San Diego, and they're working on acquiring it for restoration. I talked to Ryan Blake and Alex Markopoulos about it this past weekend, so let's go to that video now. Okay, so I have Ryan and Alex dialed up on the computer here, and let's get straight to this. Hey guys, I want to thank you for joining me here today. I appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, no problem.
Excellent.
Happy to be here.
Thank you. So we're here to talk about the President's Conference Committee car, San Diego Electric Railway 502, which is a piece that you've located and would like to acquire for the Western Railway Museum. Now, the viewers may remember we've visited the Western Railway Museum a number of times on this channel. Most recently, I think it was last year during an event called Members Day. And if you want to take a look at that video, you can certainly click on the link that just popped up in the upper right corner here. But let's talk about this a little bit, guys. So now, Ryan, you're on the board of directors of the WRM, right?
Yes, I am.
Okay, well, why don't you give the viewers, in case they haven't been watching as long, or Alex, if you want to, an idea of what the Western Railway Museum is and what you do there.
So the Western Railway Museum, if you're unfamiliar with us, we're located on Highway 12, halfway between Fairfield and Rio Vista Junction, here in California, of course. We were formed back in 1960 as a museum, but we've been around since even before that in 1946, originally as the Bay Area Electric Railroad Association. Our goal has been, throughout our history, to collect and preserve any and all electric artifacts relating to railroads throughout the western United States, being streetcars, interurbans, and even some heavy freight as well. On that, we run about 5 miles of the original Sacramento Northern Railroad, which was originally built between San Francisco and Sacramento to provide passenger and freight service. Beyond that, we do provide additional rides on our interurbans and streetcars that we maintain to run on our 5 miles.
Very good. And that's a great summary. I mean, if I had to say it, you said it a lot better than I would have. But all I would have told people is it's a really cool place to visit, and the work that they do there is pretty inspirational, I think, in terms of preservation. One of the really cool things that I remember from being there, the number of times that I've been there, is the fact that most of your storage is covered, so there's not a lot of equipment sitting out in the sun getting beat up by the weather, which is which is really nice.
Certainly a goal of ours. We actually even have fundraising in place to begin, hopefully someday in the future, getting another car barn to make sure that everything is covered.
Right, that's excellent. So let's talk about this PCC. Now, this was, according to what I've read, the first PCC car to come out to California, and it operated on the San Diego Electric, right? It was a number 502.
Yeah.
So is this car related to any of the existing pieces in the museum's collection?
Yes. We have several cars from San Diego already. Our Sacramento Northern Bernie car 62 originally came from San Diego. It was number, I think, 301. Then we also have another streetcar in the collection, which is San Diego Electric 1043. Yeah, and that's in our car barn too, which you can come out and see that car every on Members Days. Yeah, we have that barn open. Unfortunately, Members Day this year is going to be canceled due to the COVID-19, but 2021 we're planning a really big Members Day, and this is going to be our 75th anniversary, and we're maybe even looking at doing 2 days, a 2-day Members Day.
Oh, cool.
So it'll be a weekend.
I'm still in the planning stage at this point.
Yes.
So.
Yeah, something I don't
No guarantees, but
I'd like to interject something real quickly. One of the things that I ran into when I was trying to record for Members Day was I would talk to people, and it sounds like something that's only for members, and it really isn't. Members Day is an event that's open to the entire public, and the idea is to get more members. So just so you know, so if you see that the Western Railway Museum is promoting a Members Day, it's a great time to go down, see what they do, and then join the organization, because I'm sure that they're always looking to get more members. I wanted to mention that because it's kind of a strange name for something that's open to the public, and I think it confuses people sometimes.
Kind of push that we should really be calling it Members Appreciation Day, because the whole idea behind it is for, appreciating what the members have contributed to the museum by going, here's what we've got done, here's what's running. So it's showing it out for the world, going, look at what volunteers can do.
or showcase it.
Yeah. Because we're an all volunteer-based museum, so it takes a lot of volunteers to run the cars, to maintain them, to keep the track in the pristine condition that we have it, and even library work. We have one of the largest libraries, railroad libraries on the West Coast as well.
Right. So let's go back to 502. So I'm kind of curious about how you found it, and I'm also kind of curious about how bad of shape is it really in?
Well, we'd actually known about it for a little while, at least where it was, but it had never really been for sale. The gentleman who owns it just hadn't really been making it available to anybody. But a while back, I was able to find it in a form that he was looking to sell, and so I was able to contact him and figure out what's the story and what's going on with it, and that's how we started negotiations to try and acquire it for our museum.
Right, and how bad of shape is it? I mean, is it going to require a lot of work?
It had received some fire damage while it was in prior ownership before this gentleman, while it was down in San Diego with the Historical Society down there. Most of the fire damage was pretty much relegated to everything above the skirt, the floor, and above. So most of the electronics and everything else that's on the car were pretty much saved.
The only sign of fire damage on it currently is there is just a little bit of charring, and you can see some on the interior where some of the fire might have damaged the metal. But it's nothing that we can't fix. Mm-hmm. The car has its original floors in it. So, and all of the electronics that make the car go are underneath the floor. We've gone under the car and we've made sure everything is there. So everything to make the car go is still there. There's a lot more body work that needs to be done. There is some spots where there's lots of rust and corrosion, but they're in the typical spots where PCCs have their normal areas of rot. And this is stuff that we've done before. Our 1016 car was in relatively similar condition body-wise. And that car went through the shop, and 5 years later, it came out beautiful, brand new again. So we could do the same exact thing for the 502.
I think it's a better example of a PCC than even some of the stuff running in San Francisco, because they've been modified. Ours is as original as it gets, and that's our goal with the 502 as well.
Right, and as original as it gets, and it's historical because it's the first one to operate in California, which I think is pretty cool. I mean,
I think it's the whole West Coast, isn't it?
Yeah, the whole West Coast.
Oh, is that right? Okay.
Yeah.
Not just California.
There was also some PCCs Canada, I think, that
Yes.
came a little later, too.
Yeah, but that makes it even more special. That's pretty cool.
As a matter of fact, this car has sort of a two-part history. The first part being in San Diego, and then in the 1950s, both 502 and a lot of its other sister PCC cars from San Diego were sold to the El Paso City lines in Texas. And that was a real interesting operation because it not only operated in El Paso, Texas, but they also crossed into the border into Mexico, into the border city Ciudad Juarez. So, just imagine, a streetcar, these days going into Mexico from the United States. It's something that you would never think would actually have happened in the past. So we want to tell that story also with its arrival at the museum.
So here's the question, and I'm sure this is what a lot of people are thinking. Well, two questions. The first one I'll ask you is, do you have any idea, assuming everything goes according to plan and you get it into your shops there, how long do you think it would take to get it restored to a condition where it can run again for the public?
Well, that's dependent on the shop schedule. Because right now we're actually working on two other cars in there right now. The Sacramento Northern Bernie, which we mentioned earlier, which is also originally a San Diego car. That one's currently working on getting some truck work done. But we also have our first car in our collection, number 271, in the shop getting some extensive work done to hopefully have it, well, originally the hope was have it next year, but we'll see how it all works out. As for how long it'd take to get 502 done, most restoration work in our museum for the level of quality that we want to get to can take 3-4 years on occasion. So it's dependent on when we get it into the shop and then just how many volunteers we have to work on it, because it takes a lot of skill to get these to the standards we want.
The 1016 took about 5 years to restore, so I would suspect that the 502 would be somewhere around the same amount of time.
Right. Well, I mean, there's also the all too common occurrence of once you get working on something and taking it apart, you find stuff that you didn't realize was wrong, and it just becomes a bigger project than you ever thought you had.
That's a guarantee on almost every restoration.
Right?
Yeah.
So the other question that I was thinking of that I'm sure people are wondering about, which is a question that I have, which is how can people help? Because that's really what we're about here, is trying to help you find the help that you need. So I'm guessing you probably will need donations, but you probably also need volunteer help as well, right?
The biggest way to help support us in acquiring the 502 is to go to our GoFundMe page and donate there. We're already at, as of recording this, we're at 56% of our goal. So we're halfway to bringing this car to our museum. So it's pretty exciting.
Okay, that's cool. And I'll go ahead and put a link to the GoFundMe in the description of this podcast below. Or if you're watching this as a standalone interview, you'll see a link in the description below. And what about for the museum? Is there a website? Like if people are interested in finding out more about the museum and interested in finding out how they can volunteer, what's the best way for them to do that?
So if you're ever interested in finding out more about our museum, what you can do is go to our website, wrm.org. On that website, we have details about all the cars in our collection, volunteering if you'd like. One will be open again, of course, and actually quite a bit more. I'm quite proud of our website. That's actually something both Ryan and I handle and maintaining as well, in addition to raising for the 502. Find us on Facebook. It's always a great place to find updated information about how the funding is going, any other projects that may be happening in the museum. We try and post on there all the time. There's many projects that happen behind the scenes that we like to try and get people a little bit of information about. So,
okay. Sounds great. I really hope this helps, and I think that we've given the viewers enough information that they can act on if they want to. So thank you very much for joining me here, guys, and I appreciate you taking the time.
Well, thank you for having us.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you.
It's fortunate that they were able to find a car with the rich history the 502 has, and I think it'll make a really great addition to the collection at the Western Railway Museum. I designed a couple new things for Teespring last month. They're cloth face masks. I figured we could use these in the future for chasing trains, since masks seem to be the new normal. Check them out when you get a chance. Mine are on the way already. And if you get one, you can send me a picture of yourself chasing trains wearing it, and I'll share it on a future podcast or on one of our social media channels. And now it's time for our catches of the month. These first photos came from Chris in New Mexico again through our mutual friend Al Hovey. The first one is of the Amtrak Sunset Limited. The composition is great. The next one is a Union Pacific Manifest Freight. I really like the sky in this shot. Speaking of nice sky, check out this shot of an auto rack train. And finally, here's a shot of an Arizona Eastern train with trackage rights over Union Pacific's tracks. When's the last time you saw B40-8s on a main line? And these shots came from train crew member Brandon Bader from Georgia, shooting on a Canon T6S. He caught CSX number 3045 leading a southbound local on the CSX Gainesville Midland sub in Georgia, and he was able to catch it twice. Nice shots, Brandon. Thanks for sharing. And finally, this shot comes from Tom McAdams. I saved it for last because it's a vintage Southern Pacific shot from Woodford out on Tehachapi Pass. It shows a Southern Pacific loaded oil can unit train climbing uphill toward the loop. 9323 is an SD45T-2, and it's on the point there. This was taken in the summer of 1987. Thanks, Tom. I think that's a really cool shot. So if you have something you'd like to share, you're welcome to send it to me at podcast@tsgmultimedia.com. All I ask is that you only send your own photos and tell me what it is and when and where it was taken. I might not be able to share all the photos I get, but I'd like the chance to share your best catches if you're willing to share them. And now for this month's YouTube program schedule. I want to mention real quick that you'll notice I'm releasing quite a few programs this month at a time other than 9 a.m. 9 a.m. has been our normal release time for years now, and I'm just trying something different. The end result could end up being that all programs will end up being released at 5, starting at some point in the near future, or more likely we'll keep everything coming out at 9. I just need to get some more data to figure out if switching makes any sense. If you have a preference, please feel free to leave a comment in the comments section below the video, because your feedback does matter on this. So I mentioned that later today at 5 p.m. Pacific time, to check out the preview of the 2021 NMRA National Convention with our NMRA Regional President, Chris Palermo. There are a lot of big plans in motion to make next year's convention one to remember, and you can hear all about it straight from Chris, who also happens to be the publicist for the event. On Friday, August 7th at 5 p.m., we have an episode of N-Scale Friday on deck. Next Saturday, August 8th, Model Trains Galore Part 3 comes out. It's more great model run-by shots from many different layouts. On Friday the 14th at 5, Product Spotlight returns with something a little different, some HO scale heavy machinery. On Saturday the 15th, I'm inviting you to see another example of one of our TSG Train Crew virtual hangouts. It's the one I talked about earlier with author J.E. Dyer. We talked about a lot more than just one book, and it's another great example of one of the perks TSG Train Crew members enjoy. On the 21st at 5, N-Scale Friday happens again. On the 22nd, it's the return of Model Railroading with Jack Burgess. In this episode, Jack shows us the details he added around the second level of his layout based on photos in his collection. The first part of this series came out in June, and it has been one of the most viewed programs on the channel since that time. On Sunday the 23rd at 4 p.m. Pacific Time, we're going live once again with our special Shelter-in-Place live webcast. In this episode, I'll give viewers a mid-month update, and we'll chat like we did last time. If you have a question you want to ask, have it ready. On the 28th, we have Product Spotlight again. And finally, on the 29th, yes, August has 5 Saturdays this year, we're going to have a special unboxing accompanied by an important announcement about the channel that I'm pretty excited about. So, that's all I have for you this time. Before I go, I want to invite you once again to become a part of the TSG Train Crew. I think you'll feel great about helping put the content that you enjoy on the channel for the world to see, and you'll get some pretty cool perks too. So, as always, I thank you for your continued support, and I'll see you next time.